Oh no, here we go again.
We're laughing aloud now, magic in the air. Wands roll around us, cast away our care. Friends in the hallways, adventures we find. Spells and enchantments, trouble on our mind. That's so wizards, oh, 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 oh. Life is a spell we know. We're casting joy and glow, oh, oh. That's a wizard show.
It's another Wednesday, which means it's another chance to take a look at Wizards of the Coast being Wizards of the Coast. And I really need to keep my mouth shut because I know yesterday, as I was filming my daily Diablo 4 free through live play, I said, oh, well, looks like we've got an entire almost 2 weeks without Wizards of the Coast doing anything. I might not have anything to talk about tomorrow. And I laid my little OGGM head down in the OGGM bed for the night, curled up with Steve the cat, and I woke up this morning at my usual 3 o'clock. And, look, Wizards of the Coast just announced a playtest of horror-themed subclasses and some brand new art of a very familiar-looking castle, and announcing a mystery product for October after saying, oh, we weren't going to do any more products for 2025. October, mystery subclasses, picture of a familiar looking castle. We'll talk about the unusual artwork in just a sec. And didn't somebody say a week ago and 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago that Wizards was going to revisit Ravenloft yet again for 2025 D&D? Because they said they were going to do nostalgia baiting, and they said Ravenloft was one of the ones they were going to do yet again, even though they've done it. And oh, look at this. It's Wednesday, it's 8 o'clock, and Wizards of the Coast is saying, hey, look, we're doing horror again. I mean, our version of horror, but still horror. Who predicted Ravenloft was going to be it? Someone in this room. Oh, it was me. It was me. Not that it was much of a prediction. I was just basically repeating what they said. They said, oh, we don't have to do anything original anymore. We're just going to keep repeating stuff we've already done, kind of like we've been doing with Magic. We'll talk about Magic in a second. So yeah, Wizards announced, hey, we're doing a new playtest. It's going to be on horror-themed subclasses. Those horror-themed subclasses can include the College of the Spirits Bard, the Grave Domain Cleric, spelled Cletic, the Phantom Rogue, the Shadow Sorcerer, the Hexblade Warlock, the Undead Warlock, the Reanimator Artifactor, who makes animated companions, and the Hollow Warden Ranger. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, those all sound extremely familiar, OGGM. Well, that would be because all those already exist and have been done between 2014 and 2024. So why do we need to see them again if they've already been done? Well, we have to make them compatible with 2025 D&D, and we also have to pad an upcoming product. So rather than giving us brand new original stuff, they're just going to take stuff they already did, dust it off, maybe change a few words, and reproduce it for 2025 Dungeons and Dragons, which of course would add evidence to the fact that it's not backwards compatible, because I wouldn't need to update a class that already existed if it still worked, would I? It's a new edition, okay? It's a new edition. It's D&D 6. Let's just get it. I'll agree. It's a new edition. 5.5 or whatever you want to call it is a brand new edition. If you have to make a new character, if you have to reprint stuff you've already done, it's a brand new edition. It's just like 3.5 and 3. All right, so this is the Ravenloft artwork that came with the announcement. Totally not AI. Let's see. We've got knockoff Von Helsing here, and his eyesight is going towards the castle. Okay, then we've got this lady here who's got drawing her sword and I think has something else in her hand, and her eyesight's going towards this raven. Then we've got maybe Strahd, who looks really weird, and his eyesight's going over here. So are this just one picture and another picture superimposed on top of each other? Did somebody just add this picture of maybe Strahd into this other picture of these guys looking at the castle? Because I would think if Strahd suddenly showed up right over here, you'd be looking at him, ready to jump on him. And what is he standing on? Nothing. It just, not AI. Totally not AI. Yeah. Not that that's a lot to be upset about, because they have made some more disturbing art than this, but it just, I mean, we looked at the art from the Dragon book and we were like, wow, this art's actually really good. Wizards, why don't you use this art? And we looked at some of the art that didn't make it into Player's Handbook, and we were like, hey, wow, Wizards, this art's great. Why didn't you use it? Instead, you give us this. What is this? What is going on with this? Thanks to Diversity and Dragons for linking this picture. This is from something, I think the new Munster Manual. I'm not sure. And it's getting a lot of hullabaloo because of the portrayal of the mostly non-human village. And a lot of people saying, well, this isn't Dungeons and Dragons. And for some reason, showing the tiefling with the skin pigmentation issue is people saying, I don't want this in my game. Also, apparently, Wizards of the Coast is removing redheads from Dungeons and Dragons. Has anybody else heard this? Or, I mean, I don't know if this is a true rumor or just people extrapolating on D&D's getting rid of everything else, so soon they're going to start going after redheads. I'm not sure why we have an issue with the tiefling with the skin pigmentation issue. I can see why some people are upset by this portrayal, because it doesn't portray real D&D. Instead, it just shows a slice of life in a village. I guess maybe some people were upset about the semi-angel character flying around, except if I had winged characters flying around in my Freeport campaign. Dragonborn kid, or half-orc kid, I guess, and human kid sitting watching. The dwarf baker. Again, I think the main problem with the dwarf baker for me was not that a dwarf was using, making bacon. Why would, I mean, I guess dwarves could bake. I don't, it's not the first career you think that a dwarf would fall into, but sure, why not? My problem was always, the footwear. There's nothing really offensive about this picture, except for maybe the Drow elf child out in the daylight. That and whatever this is, this halfling, I guess. These are just sort of not just kind of, but yeah, I gotta disagree on this one. I don't really feel this one's in any way, shape, or form disturbing or insulting or controversial. It's just showing a slice of life. Maybe a halfling would inherit the skin pigmentation issue. I don't know. Maybe a tiefling. I don't know. I mean, I guess because it doesn't show the more classic look to D&D and just is another just kind of slice of life. And a lot of people are just, are sort of upset about the slice of life, comfy cottage core direction that Wizards is taking the game. And I mean, that's Wizards is going to do what Wizards are going to do. I think we've all agreed that, with the exception of maybe 2 people on the planet, that this isn't D&D anymore. And whatever the history of Wizards of the Coast D20 going forward between now and 230, it's dying. It's dead. It's done. With Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford leaving, it's done. So yeah, I mean, really, what am I just talking about now anymore? By 2030, D&D as we know it will cease to exist. But that's okay, because Dungeons and Dragons, the idea is alive and well and will be carried forward into the future by companies like Trollord Games and the Arcane Library and Goodman Games and specifically, Kobold. And even my little piece of D20 nonsense will help carry the idea of Dungeons and Dragons. Gygax's dream will continue long after I'm alive. If Dungeons and Dragons remains the #1 selling game in the United States, though its numbers are maybe not as high as some people think. Well, whatever Wizards of the Coast ends up doing with the name won't really matter, because the branding of the name. So that brings us, segue, to some confusion regarding D&D numbers. This is cycled through yet again. I don't know why it's cycled through yet again, but it's cycled through yet again. In regards to Player's Handbook sales, Dungeon Master Guide sales, Monster Manual sales for 2025, and Wizards of the Q1, Q2 release numbers, and Wizards claims about how many they actually sold as opposed to how many they sold. So let's start with Player's Handbook. Player's Handbook 2024 sold. Wizards made the announcement it's the #1 selling D&D product of all time, if you don't count anything between 1976 and the day that it was released. But what Wizard forgot to include in that math, which got them in trouble, and they are being sued, was, of course, the fact that 3 weeks prior to release date, there were the 3,000 plus copies that were made available at Gen Con. Now, that number goes into the total sold. Then there were all the pre-orders, which they shipped out before street date. That goes in to the total number sold. Then the week before street date, they made copies available to a select group, mom and pop brick and mortar stores. Those numbers goes towards the number sold street date. So when street date hits and all those books were made available across the country on the Barnes and Noble and wherever else, the Target, Amazon, Diamond, they took the numbers of the product that was sold before street date, added it to the product that was sold street date, waited to the end of the week, and then released the total saying, this is how much we actually sold. But they violated the street date, and a large chunk of what they said sold wasn't sold. It was sitting in a warehouse. And then another large chunk of things that they said were sold was already on markdown at places like Ollie's and Target and Walmart and the big chain stores, as well as the small mom and pop stores, were saying, we don't have enough copies. In fact, I was in a Barnes & Noble 2 weeks ago, no D&D books. I was in Target yesterday, no D&D books. And that's just here in a small little beach town in California. If you want to look at the numbers, which are available, you can just check, Stephen Glicker posts them all the time. I've linked down below. You can see that the booksellers that list the books that are sold every week, inventory wise, the numbers that Wizards is saying and the numbers that are actually sold are different. This is the same thing that they did with Monster Manual, where they released it in Europe before they released it here in America, but added those numbers and again violated street date. And with the DMG, which they released a week before at a convention, then released street date, violating street date yet again, which again got them into trouble. So the actual number of sales opposed to what is actually exists is slightly different. Then Wizards did their little Hasbro magic, where Hasbro goes, look how much money Wizards made in Q1 and again in Q2. We sold X amount of Magic the Gathering, and we sold Y amount of everything else that's gaming. And that includes D&D. Well, technically, Hasbro Gaming did sell a lot of stuff. But D&D is only a small part of that lot of stuff that Hasbro, quote unquote, gaming sold, because Hasbro Gaming and Wizards of the Coast sales include Monopoly Go, Baldur's Gate 3. Every time something is downloaded from D&D Beyond monthly subscription. Every time something from Wizards of the Coast is used on Roll20, counts as digital. Gaming also concludes all the video games and all the board games and the card games and stuff that they can say is digital or gaming. And then they mush that all together and they say, look how much money Wizards of the Coast made. And yes, that is a percentage of that is Dungeons and Dragons. But all we have to tell you is, look how much money Wizards of the Coast made. Sure, 90% of that is Magic the Gathering and the video shit. But math-wise, it's all one thing, right? So the numbers are bloated. The amount of sales and the amount of sales claimed are not the same. Wizards has in trouble for that in regards to saying, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Those numbers aren't available. Yeah, they are. They're not available to me, but they are available to people in the industry. Stephen Glicker has them and has posted them. Professor Dungeon Master has them, has posted them. Links to Stephen Glicker talking about it in the description below. So there was some, now this isn't a major thing. Hasbro has been misrepresenting numbers for a while. But most companies misrepresent numbers. It's not an out-and-out lie. It's just a little bureaucracy accounting magic. As long as the shareholders get their shares, and as long as the money all equals at the end, they can play, it doesn't really violating any major laws. It's a little unscrupulous, but in the great scheme of things, it's not that unscrupulous. Everybody does it. I don't, because I don't sell enough shit, but taxes, bureaucracy, accounting, bottom line, percentages, bloody, 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 bloody. As long as your shareholders are happy, as long as you make more than you spend, as long as when your Q2 numbers post, you can show a profit, who cares how it trickles down? Every company does this in some way, shape, or form. Just Wizards of the Coast seems to find new and exciting ways on a weekly basis to do this basic aspect of business in the most ridiculously stupid way possible. It's like they want to fail. They want to look stupid. And if your goal is that at the end of the day, you're still showing a profit and your shareholders are still showing a profit and still happy, well, as somebody who is a shareholder who still has one Wizards of the Coast share, I can tell you, no, we're not happy. And why aren't we happy? Because you still ended the year owing us money. And when the Q2 numbers were posted, you've only paid off $30 million of the $1 billion you still owe the shareholders. Not counting the $9 million you owe that people and the $3 million you owe those people and the money that's all wrapped up in Diamond and the money that's all wrapped up in the Roll20 and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, Wizards is not as successful as some people think, and it's not as successful as Hasbro likes to occasionally portray. And with Crawford and Perkins and 90% of the staff gone, the shuck and jive that we're familiar with from Wizards is gonna continue to dwindle. The surprise announcement of Ravenloft 2025 will not be as argumentative as I think they would think. And, you know, it feels like more and more they do these stupid things because at least they know it's going to get them attention. And negative attention is still attention, you know, as far as they're concerned, as far as the algorithm is concerned, that idiot in Ventura, the OGGM, is still talking about Wizards every freaking week. So does it really matter if it's bad news? It's still people talking about us. And if we can't win with positive news, well, negative attention is still attention. The algorithm still shows people are talking about us, but that's going to dwindle around. I mean, I literally was like, I'm going to have nothing to talk about today. Wizards hasn't done anything all week. The D&D grind is slowing down. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro's goals for Wizards of the Coast have been plain and simple since 2020, and the end is near. You know, the 10-year plan is done. The 5-year plan for 6th edition is printed. It's done. There's nothing after 2030. D20 physical will peter down to a small chunk and then eventually cease to exist because Hasbro has made it very clear what they think the future for D&D, their product, is. And whatever Hasbro chooses to do with Dungeons and Dragons, whether they shelf it, whether they, you know, continue to promote it as a brand, that's what they're going to do. But in a sense, all Hasbro owns is the name and the brand. And while that brand is very popular, why that idea is what they're counting on to remain number one is probably something that won't cease to exist for a long time. The game itself is dead. And that's okay, because there are plenty of other people who have taken the legacy of D20 level-based fantasy, taken the legacy of Gygaxian fantasy, are continuing forward with it. And those are the companies that are getting the most positive attention. You know, more people talk about Shadow Dark every week than they do D&D. More people talk about Troll Lord Games and Castles and Crusades every week than they do D&D. More and more people are leaving D&D for other better games. Every week you see 2 to 5 brand new retro clones, brand new original takes on the classic fantasy, because more and more people are looking at Wizards of the Coast and going, yeah, you're done. Now, will D&D always be number one? Even if Wizards of the Coast ceases to exist, and even if Hasbro shells it, the idea will always been ingrained in pop culture mentality, especially here in the United States and across the world. So the idea that every time you roll dice, even if you're playing Star Wars, superheroes, Old West, modern day, space, whatever, pop culture says that the second I'm rolling dice, the second I'm sitting down at a table, I'm playing D&D. Even if I'm playing Star Wars, it's D&D from the pop culture point of view. Ooh, comments. I wasn't expecting any comments today. Yeah. That, I don't know how you would scrub that from pop culture. Maybe 50 years from now, it'll eventually fade away. I don't know. I doubt I'll be alive, but for the foreseeable future, Hasbro owns that idea. And that's what they count on marketing. That even if they are not making Dungeons and Dragons product, they can milk the idea that, and from a pop culture point of view, anytime anybody's sitting down and playing any role-playing game, it's Dungeons and Dragons. Even if it's not, even if it's Star Wars, even if it's superheroes, that it falls under that blanket that we're playing D&D. Or we're playing something like D&D. I'll check it out. So yeah, the future will be other companies. Wizards of the Coast will shut her down. Hasbro will continue to market the brand, and that will be what people think. And in regards to it, will it always be number one sales-wise? No, because it eventually will cease to exist. It's number one now, but it didn't sell as much this year as it sold last year. Wizards of the Coast definitely did not make as much money this year as they did, say, in 2020. I mean, 2018 to 2020 was the big golden day. And then 2020 to 2023, they were able to continue to ride the wave of that big golden Critical Role / COVID chunk of time. But then the stupidity began. Well, actually, the stupidity began before 2023, but really 2023 was the year where it was being made blatantly clear I'm looking at 4 games that aren't D20 D&D based. Well, I can recommend a game that's D20 based, but not D&D. It's called Vigilantes for Shadowdark, and it's pretty freaking cool from what I hear. And I hear the guy who wrote it's about to release at least 2 more products and maybe be doing his first Kickstarter by the end of the year. Yeah, and I forgot what I was talking about. Thank you very much. So we're just going to look at Steve for a second. Hi, Steve. Hi, Steve. Hi, Steve. Oh, yeah. While it might be number one sales here in the United States, it's not selling what it was a year ago. It's definitely not selling what it was 4 years ago. And let's not forget that there's a whole entire planet out there that are not playing Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, consistently, the rest of the world, D&D is not number one. The single largest chunk of population on the planet, Asia. What's the number one selling game in Asia? It ain't D&D. It's Call of Cthulhu. The term D&D is a representative for all tabletop role-playing games seems to be losing steam. Just a personal anecdotal observation. Probably. I mean, generally with, if you see a bunch of people playing at a table and somebody walks up and goes, "What are you guys playing?" They'll say, "Oh, we're playing blah, blah, blah." It's kind of like D&D because of that pop culture connection. Will the pop culture connection fade? I don't know. Maybe. It's obviously not as big as it was a year ago or 5 years ago. D&D is not appearing in the media as much as it was, though it's still showing up in the media. I mean, I saw somebody doing a Stranger Things haunt just the other day, and part of the Stranger Things haunt was a room with the D&D setup from the game from, episode 1 of Stranger Things. So yes, haunts are already starting, even though it's May. But technically at this point, why stop? Why close down? Halloween is year long now. So yeah, we'll see a bump when Stranger Things Final probably drops, if they mention D&D in Stranger Things Final at all. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It'll never go away. D&D would have come into existence in some form, even if Gygax had never made D&D, and or Wesley never made Bronstein, or Slythe never made Strategos, or King Charles never made. I mean, every week we're finding new information that the hobby existed before Gygax. So D&D would have come into existence inevitably anyways. And D&D will never go away. The name might not mean anything in 50 years other than that, hey, remember that thing from 50 years ago? But now we're all playing Vigilantes from Shadowdark, and that's the number one role-playing game on the planet Earth, right? I don't know. It's up to each and every one of you. I'm just here to regurgitate the news and keep you amused for a half an hour before we listen to that awesome song. And It is kind of ironic that once again I predicted something, and it came true. You know, I predicted they were going to do Ravenloft, and then woke up this morning and bam, horror! You're going to do Ravenloft again. I mean, it's not really a prediction because, well, what did they tell us just the other day? They told us that the plan for 2025, 2026, and probably for the rest of the time till they shut down in 2:30 is, one, just revisit previous stuff. We're going to revisit Keep of the Borderlands and the brand new starter set, and then they're probably going to do another revisit to Keep of the Borderlands or a revisit to Fendelver. We're revisiting Ravenloft. They've already said they're probably going to redo Giants and a couple of the other classics. I bet we will see a new version of Tomb of Horrors, because when in doubt, just release that. We'll probably see another monster manual, probably see another book dedicated to one specific monster like they just did with the Dragon book, so they can say, hey, you know how we've never, ever talked about this monster before? Well, here's a brand new book where we talk about that monster for the first time, even though we've talked about it for the past 50 years. Or, you know, maybe Mackenzie will come forward and say something like, oh, canonically, I am the very first X that ever played, and this is the very first time that ever appeared. I don't know. I think just at the end of the day,
we're laughing aloud now, magic in the air. Wands swirl around us, cast away our care. Friends in the hallways, adventures we find. Spells and enchantments, trouble on our mind. That's so wizards, life is a spell we know. We're casting joy and glow, that's a wizard show. Mischief in the classroom, potions gone astray. Flying through the quad, now brighter every day. Laughter we cry hard, sneaking out at night. Cloaks in the moonlight, everything feels right.